and welcome you to this successive event of CSD on the safety of our information space. This event comes at a critical juncture as Bulgaria and Romania face escalating challenges from disinformation, cognitive capture, and pro-Kremlin narratives that undermine democratic institutions. In addition, there are very few initiatives coming out of this region, and few voices make it to the global mainstream media policy debate, making Bulgaria, for those of us that are here, practically invisible in the global centers of decision-making. And this is something that we would like to change. And I'm very happy that today we will be discussing this topic, and people will understand that there is a lot of initiatives coming out, in particular from my colleagues at the Democracy Shield Task Force in this regard. Recent developments highlight the urgency of our discussion. We continue to be in the eye of the hybrid warfare storm. We should not, though, be fooled that our initiatives, of course, on tackling this hybrid warfare storm, of course, infringe on the basic values of our democracies, including freedom of speech, which our friends from across the ocean, which we had the pleasure of visiting last week, have made very clear to us. And of course, this should be, we should be very, very careful when discussing these issues. But nevertheless, I think the brazenness, the audacity of this, and the length of this disinformation campaign that Russia has been leading against Europe has to be worrying us. Let us just look at 3 examples from last week. The multiple reports on foreign interference in Romania's presidential elections runoff, raising alarms about electoral integrity, the fundamental of our democratic existence. Remember the attack by a Russian fighter jet in NATO's airspace to protect a Shadow Fleet tanker, which was again used to repeat all the disinfo narratives out there. And the continuing proliferation of mushroom sites spreading false narratives in Bulgaria, let's say, exploding societal mistrust. And again, on top of another aggressive intrusion of Russia's foreign ministry spokesman denouncing the existence of Russian propaganda in Bulgaria and Russian language schools, finally, someone in Bulgaria dared to expose the Bulgarian national television. So this was immediately picked up by the Russian foreign ministry and immediately thrown into the Bulgarian internal political debate. These incidents underscore the need for robust strategies to protect our democracies. Our conference will explore how the European Commission's European Democracy Shield can enhance the enforcement of the Digital Services Act, streamline efforts to counter foreign information manipulation, and support independent media, the paragon of our freedom and democracy. We are honored to welcome Jane Kusela, Director General of Defense Policy at the Finnish Ministry of Defense, with whom I will have the pleasure now to have an introductory, hopefully very lively discussion and dialogue, friendly dialogue, I have to say, with Finland being our friends and allies, both in the EU and NATO, on hybrid threats and digital governments. I will ask you to join us for a discussion afterwards on decoding disinformation tactics and strengthening digital regulation, featuring experts like my colleagues, Todor Galev, Rossi Jekova, the head of our newly formed Disinformation Democracy Shield Task Force, and of course our partners, Madalina Botan, Miroslav Sazdowski, and Simona Veleva and Paul Goza. Together, we look forward to finding the different solutions, and I will now transition. I feel like a little bit of an anchor and host today with this, and I hope that Jane will stay with me. So, Jane, good morning. It is a distinct pleasure of having you in Sofia today. And of course, I have to say your name in this country and in North Macedonia is very well recognized because Jane is a national hero on both sides of the border. And this has been, by the way, one of course, this national hero, Jana Sandanski, that I'm talking to, has, of course, been used by Russia to stoke divisions between, again, allies and friends like Bulgaria and North Macedonia. I wanted to first start by asking you about Finland's national response to hybrid threats from Russia. You know, you have the longest border to defend on, in NATO. You've recently joined NATO, reversing a long and well-established policy of non-alignment, defense non-alignment. So I wanted to ask you what is particularly interesting in your understanding of Finland's policy strategy and practical approach aimed at countering Russian origin hybrid threats, in particular the Finnish total defense model. How has your calculus changed after joining NATO?
Well, thank you, Ruslan, and thank you for the chance to be here. And I'm really happy to have a chance to visit your beautiful capital. Coming from the Arctic Circle, this feels like a summer holiday. It's kind of beautiful weather, and thank you. Actually, we have been building our kind of a resilience towards hybrid threats on basically same concept ever since the Second World War. We have been fine-tuning it as our society has evolved, so it kind of takes into account how the Finnish society develops and also how the threats develop. But the basic thinking behind it has remained very same. So the way we prepare for all kind of malign influencing and actions toward Finland, as we have identified what are the vital functions of our society. And they are things like leadership, that we can lead the country, its defense capacity, its internal security, its psychological resilience and things like that. And we think that we need to be able to take care of those in all situations, no matter what happens. And we do it in a model where we collaborate between the authorities, the business community, the industry, organizations, NGOs, think tanks, and the citizens. So it's really a whole of a nation model. It's well understood in Finland that according to the United Nations, we should be the happiest country in the world. Sometimes we wonder if we are. That's what they say. But basically, we like the society we have built for ourselves, and we think it works well for us. But we do understand that with our location and our small population, it's not a given. So we need to defend it. And it's kind of a deal that Finns feel that the other side of the coin is that everybody has the responsibility to stand for our society. These vital functions, they face nowadays all kinds of threats from human action, from technological developments, and also from natural causes. And there can many disruptions of crises are kind of possible. So we think that also to assess the risks related to them, they provide you grounds for your preparedness and for your response. I think the general principles of safeguarding the vital functions of the society, they are democracy, rule of law, and the focus on individual, also the collaboration and inclusiveness and openness. One thing I would like to highlight is that the individuals are key actors in comprehensive security. Our president used to say that Finnish defense and security begins from between the ears of every Finnish citizens. So I would argue that in the end of the day, it's a question of mindset or attitude. And the individual's functional capacity, knowledge, skills, security strengthening attitude, they all form the foundation for your society's resilience. And if people don't understand this and support the idea, you can pretty much forget about preparedness and resilience. It cannot be done by authorities alone. That's what we believe very much in our model.
Can I just just very briefly ask you on that. It's one of the, because your president wrote the European, in a way, the preparation for the new European preparedness report for Commissioner von der Leyen, your former president. And also, in this country, we're very similar, in terms of population size and in terms of having long history of with Russia in particular. And I couldn't agree more with this, that the individual being, each and every individual having to decide on the fundamental values that they have to adhere to. But how do you deal with the political divide that clearly Russia has been aiming at? So clearly Finland, in comparison to Russia, is a, you have to see this huge gargantuan power on the other side, aggressive, that is currently killing people in Ukraine, aggressively pumping on disinformation all across all the channels. How has your posture changed? How have you developed these, been able to withstand this pressure on your internal political institutions? Have there been any divisions within that, coming from Russia? Because we've seen here, parties dissenting, saying, okay, we think we're better off with Russia, maybe not work with the EU, with Brussels. Is this part of your debate too? Has this had an impact, or have you been able to find a formula that allows you to stay firm, all across different political forces, like we've seen, let's say, in Italy or even in France? I mean, countries that people have hoped, or Russia has hoped, that when they see the change in the political leadership, they say, okay, so these are new people, they will be thinking in a new direction. But they say, we are still, our fundamental values are this, and we're different from Russia. How have you been able to deal with that?
Yeah, I think we don't have this phenomenon in Finland hardly at all. The kind of the whole of the nation and the political parties are very united in this regard, and it kind of stems from our history and our background and experiences we have had in our past with Russia. I once tried to count how many wars we have fought with Russia, and I'm not sure if I caught all of them, but there were dozens, and we usually lost most of them. But somehow we managed to remain independent, sovereign republic, and we were also for roughly 100 years part of the Russian Empire. So we kind of, it's very much interwoven in the Finnish society that we stand very united on this. But I have to say that in today's very digitalized, data-centric society, with the rise of the artificial intelligence and the increasing role of social media, it's sometimes, more and more demanding to make sure that you have all the safeguards in place. And we especially think about our youth in this, and they are the main target audience for our education efforts, not only because the youth is the future, but they also spend amazingly a lot of time in social media, and they are kind of also, in a sense, vulnerable for all kinds of influence attempts. But as such, to your question, there is no internal division in Finland about how to deal with Russia.
That's fantastic, because we constantly have to deal with that, coming from different from different places and spaces, and we are very much interested in the Finnish experience of building this total defense model, which apparently starts with your excellent education and school system, which, as I mentioned, we had recently had an experience here with that, Russia attacking that too. Russian is very popular among Bulgarians, and clearly Russian language schools, we haven't been paying enough attention as to what is going on there. Besides the soft power that this plays, how had this been used or misused, I would say, to allow our democratic model to be unraveled or disrupted from within. And this is something that creates another division. Let me ask you about the Finland joined the NATO. Clearly, I think recognizing the threat that Russia poses, Russia will definitely try to portray this in a different manner. You know, they've been trying to always show NATO as the aggressive force, closing in on Russia, creating all this, including in the war in Ukraine, which of course creates this all these narratives. But let me ask you about the EU preparedness. How do you see your role and what the EU could do to to address these hybrid threats, but also in terms of defense? Because clearly our US partners have asked us, I think rightly so, you know, to shoulder a bigger part or take care of our own security. What do you think are the steps that we could take to do that over and above what we do in NATO? What do you see as a next step? How do you see this integrate into the wider area of the European democracy shield, you know, or the defense preparedness that your former president has been suggesting?
Yes, I mean, I'm sure there is a whole lot we can do in the EU. And the whole EU is under constant kind of very hard pressure from our adversaries. And in a sense, I guess you can argue that the current structures and processes and also the legal framework or the legal basis that we have in the EU, it's been created over decades when our own security needs were not at the core. So those things were established in 1990s when the security environment was very different, and also the basis of our common foreign and security and defense policies stem from that time. Then the direct threats to the EU were perceived as, I can say, historically low, and now we are in a very different situation. And so I think we need to make sure that our legislation and working methods and tools match the challenges we face. And there is kind of the elements are there in the EU. I think one challenge here is the big machinery of the EU and the coherence of different parts and the overall vision of where to guide it. And again, based on our understanding on preparedness and resilience, we believe that in its core this is also an issue of attitude. And I think, I mean, the need for better preparedness forces us to consider also our mindset and even our values and how to defend them from a new perspective. So, I mean, there is an increasing awareness also in the EU level that the security is in the very basic or the very foundation of everything we hold dear. If our defense and security fails, then there's no well-being, no business. I mean, it's the basis for all of our society, so there's a lot at stake. And I'd say that the thing is that we need to be aware that the adversaries, they are looking at the weaknesses in our protection, the soft spots. We have a saying in Finland that the Russian will take everything which is not nailed to the wall. And also when we were part of the Russian Empire and our soldiers were taught that, educated that when you use the bayonet, if you push it to the body and you face something hard, pull it back until you find the soft spot and then you keep pushing. And the same principle is here in the Russian thinking of how they approach. They try to find the weak and soft spots and then work on those divisions and seams that they may find. So I think that kind of on a positive note, I'm sure that we have all the elements in the EU and the numbers speak for us. We are a union of almost 450 million people, one of the world's largest economies combined. And we have tools and assets in our toolbox in the EU. And the EU has always also evolved in crisis situations, and I think we have a crisis at hand now. So the big question is that are we able to get our act together? We hold the keys to the success. This is for us to lose so in.
Yeah, it was actually this would preempted my probably final question before we move to the debate. But we all very much hope that Europe will stand together and will be able to take over the role, with indispensable role of the US in guaranteeing Europe's security. Clearly, we have a deep crisis in Ukraine. We've seen, I was at the Paris Security and Strategy Forum, the Warsaw Security Forum, and we've seen a lot of resolve coming from European politicians, including now Chancellor Merz in Germany, saying that we need to, there are still heavy and dark days ahead for us in Ukraine, and that it's not, that the attack on Ukraine is essentially an attack on European values and democracy. Do you feel like we're moving in the right direction? Do you feel like in the last 6 months you've seen speeding up of this machinery? Have you seen that from your perspective? And do you see Finland as a country that will kind of push for that?
I'm sure that we are moving to the right direction in Europe, and I see there's a very clear unified support for Ukraine, and it's a kind of a daunting task we are facing, but I'm still optimistic that we can, if we stick together and work hard, we can do this and also secure ourselves. But we have a lot to do. This is an uphill battle, and we are in Europe lagging behind in many key issues in defense. But I can see that the attitude is now correct in our capitals, and people understand why this needs to be done.
Thank you so much. I will now transfer to our colleagues for the first session of the conference. But ladies and gentlemen, great intervention again. We think that the total defense model of Finland would serve as a good example also to Bulgaria. We need to hear that. We need to hear that our friends are with us. And of course, we look forward to continuing our cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, Janne Kusala, please a round of applause for this intervention. Thank you. And now over to Rosita Jekova, who will be chairing the next session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruslan. Thank you, Mr. Kusela, for kicking off the discussion today. My name is Rosita Jekova. I'm the director of the Democracy Shield Task Force at the Center for the Study of Democracy, and I very much appreciated that we started with a bit more insights on the Finnish total defense model, and also started the discussion with speaking about a unified EU approach and a bigger resolve to tackle the issues we are facing together. However, we don't have the same starting point. I'm just always thinking Finland is also at the top of the media literacy index, right? Which is quite different situation in Bulgaria and Romania. Indeed, the European Commission has announced the European Democracy Shield initiative, which aims to enforce, basically to better coordinate, to strengthen the response towards disinformation and foreign information manipulation. This means also strengthening media literacy, fact-checking, but also better enforcement of digital regulation. But we have to help ourselves first. And let's, in this panel, then zoom in on the changing tactics of information manipulation in Bulgaria and Romania, where we stand at the moment, how the environment is evolving, and what gaps we are still facing. As I said, the two countries remain highly vulnerable to disinformation and malign foreign influence, but the threats are evolving over time. We see new tactics being adopted, multiple online channels exploited, and often the intersection between foreign actors and domestic enablers, it's quite difficult to disentangle. So are we as society and governments able to keep up? Are we playing at the same level in our resolve to respond? So let's start unpacking some of these very complex questions now with our distinguished experts who are contributing to the Bulgarian-Romanian Observatory of Online Media, the so-called Broad Hub. And if you don't know what Broad is, it's one of 14 national and multinational hubs covering the entire EU, so all of the member states, as part of the EDMO network on disinformation. The EDMO hubs are involved in detecting, analyzing, and exposing harmful disinformation campaigns, also providing media literacy activities, and also conducting regular monitoring of the implementation of policies aimed at platforms, basically to make them accountable and to make them reduce the risk of disinformation being spread. So our first speaker is Dr. Todor Galev, who is the research director at CSD, who has been leading CSD's work on foreign influence and information integrity threats for now over 10 years. And Todor will share with us key trends in information manipulation tactics, channels, and networks based on CSD's extensive research in this area. Todor, please take the floor.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you. And thank you to all of you for being with us today. Actually, I decided not to delve into some of the latest analysis that we have done in last month about narratives, disinformation narratives, actors, channels, and so on, but to step back and to see which are the major trends that we have identified in the last, let's say, 2-3 years in terms of actors, in terms of tactics that they employ, in terms of channels that have been used for production and dissemination of disinformation in this country, here in Bulgaria. So, because usually we are focused in, not only we in our analysis, but many of our colleagues, we are focused in each analysis on something specific. Either it is a specific topic, a specific target group, a specific disinformation actor, or channel, and very often we forget the overall picture. So I'll try to picture this. So this is something that you have seen actually, and most of the slides, most of the data, most of the information you probably have already seen. But I want to repeat here something that we have been repeating at least since 10 years here in Bulgaria, that the major economic, political, and social factors that enable the proliferation of disinformation and propaganda and foreign propaganda in Bulgaria remain the same. They remain the same because very often there are no coordinated policy for tackling them. So I will not go into details. I just want to mention something, that the only factor that actually changed over these 10 years or more is that the initial disinterest of European and international institutions actually changed. So the change started slowly, maybe 5-6 years ago, but of course after the start of the full-scale aggressive war of Russia against Ukraine, this changed completely. So this is unfortunately the only factor that changed. Another factor that I want to stress out, and which is very important, is the still, I would say, inaction or a very small activity or very few activities of technological platforms. So we have a great tool for that calls for accountability of technological platforms, but when it comes to particularly to small countries, small language markets, because for the platforms we are just a market, we are not a country per se, let's say. So when it comes to this kind of small language markets, the efforts that they put are very limited. I have outlined several major trends in the last 3 years. So the first one is social media dynamics. Facebook is still the biggest platform in terms of users in Bulgaria. Unfortunately, there are even not stable data that you can say that you can use, but some of them are based on different estimations. But YouTube has gained vast popularity in last years, and unlike in Romania, where TikTok was used in the pre-election campaigns, as you know, for foreign influence and so on, here in Bulgaria, YouTube was this kind of media. Probably YouTube already surpassed Facebook in terms of users. I said probably because the data are not comparable still. The third, I would say, major media, not so much in terms of users, but in terms of content that provided is Telegram. So why we are talking about Telegram? Because Telegram is the only platform for now which is almost free of regulations. So there are no any monitoring, there is no any rules and so on. So in Telegram you have the harshest type of disinformation, even illegal content. And of course, it is flooded by disinformation and propaganda. And something which is very important, unlike all the other medias, Telegram is not official institutions and mainstream media are not present in Telegram. Here are just some examples of the volumes and engagement metrics for one of the disinformation campaigns that we have been identified recently on Telegram, just to show you what are the numbers. You don't need to look at the exact numbers, but just look at the trends. So Telegram became in last 2 years one of the major sources of disinformation for this country. And as I will show you in a while, it is also involved in even is used for some of the most advanced as one of the most advanced tools for manipulating search engine results, LLM large language models like ChatGPT results and so on. Another trend is something what we call new disinformation channels and amplifiers. So some of them are newly emerged, some of them have been existing, but were not yet identified. So something that we have been showed already, Russian disinformation found a lot of different channels, very untraditional channels to penetrate Bulgarian society. One of them is torrent portals with disseminating Russian so-called documentary movies produced by one of the sanctioned by EU and US sanctions Russian TV, state-owned TV channels. We do have also the same in channels like Discord groups that have been used mostly by youth, by children even. We do have the same type of new channels talking about some of the smaller social media platforms, national social media platforms that exist here in Bulgaria. We do have this information even in the dating sites in Bulgaria. So this is what we call new disinformation channels. And some of the newly identified sources and amplifiers, like the ex-military and paramilitary groups that we have been analyzed recently. Some of you are aware of these results. Or what we have identified, and Ruslan already mentioned in the beginning, the disinformation and influence that have been spread through the educational system by the educators themselves. And unfortunately, I should say that this happened not only in the schools, this happened also in the universities, in the higher education system. It happens even in some of the specialized higher education systems that are or must be on the forefront, like the military military universities, military academy, and so on. Here you see some of the analysis that we made about the pro-Kremlin networks of former military officers that have been spreading, as you can see, actually hundreds of articles into online outlets and reaching and also hundreds of posts in and thousands of engagement into the Facebook in this case. So the other trend that we have identified is the coordinated and organized manner. There are different tactics, there are different cases, but always when we start identifying and analyzing a specific trend, a specific topic, a specific narrative, specific channel, and so on, we always can see that this is part of a bigger, organized, and very well coordinated and effective campaign and network behind this. So, you know the history of the Bulgarian so-called mushroom websites, which is in different periods of time was a network of between 300 to 700 websites pre-filled with absolutely the same content automatically, centralized management by a specific company which has been already identified, and so on. Due to different reasons, I will not go into this analysis. We have been already published it. The work or the dissemination of at least pro-Kremlin disinformation by these mushroom websites have declined in the last half a year due to some political developments here in the country and as a response of the people that stay behind this organized network. At the same time, the level of dissemination of this information by pro-Kremlin outlets remain almost stable. So they are not so big in terms of numbers of articles, but they serve as a source that is after that multiplied and amplified by other actors. Again, one of our latest analysis that shows that coordinated and organized networks, like in the case of Pravda network and its Bulgarian branch, let's say, is used not only to manipulate public opinion, but also to manipulate the results of search engines and these AI-based chatbots that all of us are using today. I should say here that this shows the very diverse set of tactics that actually, in most cases, Kremlin and pro-Kremlin amplifiers have been used in their efforts to undermine democracy. The strength of soft power actors, it's not only the Russian embassy or Russian embassies actually across the region that have been very, very effective, I should say, unlike all the other diplomatic missions of Western countries, but also other soft power actors. Ruslan in the beginning mentioned Ruski Mir, the state-owned and state-supported Russian NGO, which actually is responsible for all these activities done in Bulgarian schools and is funding these activities and so on. Something which I think is very important is that it's not only Kremlin which is the main source of disinformation in our country, but also China recently has, in a way, joined this club. So the spread of Chinese information have rapidly growing since mid-2023, and I should say that unlike the pro-Kremlin disinformation and propaganda, which mostly rely on let's say, unverifiable facts and so on, the China information presence mostly rely on something what is called information suppression. So mostly covering what are the official ideological positions of the China government and the China's Communist Party, of course, with flooding the information space with official viewpoints, let's say, that should suppress the other opinions. And something to finish, recurring narratives. We have identified and monitored recurring narratives across several domains, several major topics for years. I gave here one of the most telling one maybe. This is about the secret biolabs that either the collective West or US is developing in Ukraine or in post-Soviet space and so on and so on. We have identified these recurring narratives back in 2019, and I should say that actually it comes at that time from other countries, so it's not born here in Bulgaria, and we have identified absolutely the same narrative in last year, at the end of the last year, and always the peaks in the dissemination of these narratives is due to some specific reason that the Russian sources and Bulgarian local amplifiers are using to co-opt this topic and this narrative to something that happened recently. We do have the same cases about, of course, the special military operation in Ukraine narratives, about nationalism and anti-EU, recently with accession to the Eurozone, Schengen and so on. We have a very large set of narratives with dealing with migration, with energy security in Europe and in Bulgaria in particular, and so on and so on. Something that we have also noticed is that in last year particularly, local amplifiers started to change their tactics. So this information that is traceable to pro-Kremlin sources declines at the expense of selectively presented negative information, which is actually part of the propaganda techniques that have been developed back in 1960s actually by the so-called Brezhnev's doctrine. Another, to finish with this, this is mostly used, this tactics is mostly used, unfortunately, by local amplifiers, political commentators or incumbent politicians here in this country. So I will not stop on the what is possible and what should be done, because these are measures, recommendations that we have been pushing forward for years, but still we need to know that actually if we want to change something, if we want to have a little bit from the Finnish model, at least, we need to have a coordinated and whole of government approach. Because until now, unfortunately, most of the activities in this country have been done either by civil society or media or different type of researchers, fact checkers, and so on and so on. And in very few cases, with very few state institutions have been advancing or have been done something to tackle foreign disinformation and information manipulance here in Bulgaria. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Todor. Thank you. I suggest we take questions after we hear also from our other speaker. I hope we have a good connection with Madalina. Hello. Let me introduce our next speaker, Madalina Botan. She's an associate professor at the National University of Political Studies and Public Administration in Bucharest, where she also serves as a senior researcher at the Center for Research and Communication. She studies recent developments in online disinformation and monitors the implementation of, for example, the newly strengthened Code of Practice on Disinformation, which is now part of the Digital Services Act. So, Madalina, thank you so much for joining us online. So, we all know Romania just held the rerun of the much debated presidential elections. And of course, you have been monitoring closely what has been happening in the information environment. So please take the floor and share with us some of your recent insights. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation. So it's a pleasure to be here. We can dive deeper into Romanian elections, obviously, because there was a lot of interest in this topic for good reasons. However, I haven't prepared a presentation on this. In my presentation, I focused on the assessment of the implementation of the code of practice. So I will start with that, and then we can zoom in on elections. Obviously, because I resonate with a lot of what has been already said in terms of the narratives that were spread, the mechanics behind those narratives. Of course, in the case of Romania, a very strong foreign interference campaign. So lots of coordinated efforts to affect the integrity of elections. So I would be really looking forward to discuss about that, and also then about authorities and coordination, because I think that's key in this ecosystem. It's not only about observing what's happening out there in the media and political landscape, but also what could be the possible solutions in order to get to better societal resilience. And I'm coming back here to Finland's example, which I think has done an excellent job in increasing the societal resilience, in inoculating the citizens with the antibodies that they need in order to resist disinformation. Of course, if we want to expand on that, we should discuss, as you have already started, media literacy levels in our countries, the trust in institutions, trust in media. So it's a larger discussion, but I will start with some thoughts, some observations regarding the implementation of this in Romania. So hopefully you will be able to see my screen. If you could please confirm.
Yes, yes, thank you.
So, are you able to see the screen?
Yes, just make it presenter mode.
You are muted, but I think you can see the screen, so that's fine. I have tried to, and this is quite new because I've been working on previous transparency reports, and I have had a longitudinal approach to that because I'm monitoring what's happening or what the platforms are reporting in terms of compliance with the code of practice, which will become a code of conduct starting with this summer. Since 2023, I mean, since the beginning, after it was reinforced. But this report is based on their latest transparency reports, so that's March 2025. And why are these reports particularly relevant? It's because they cover the elections period. So the platform should have taken better measures, let's say, to ensure that the electoral processes are safe. And let's see how exactly they have done that, or at least what they have reported. Because when it comes to assessing the transparency reports, there are always these two layers, right? What the platforms have reported, and then what can be verified, what can be observed. And then we also have a third layer, actually, how effective were those actions or the measures taken. So we'll get to that part as well. When it comes to the context, as I've said, I will try to cover, because it's a lot of information, as some of you might know, in case you are familiar with these reports of the large platforms of the VLOPs. I try to cover only the main platforms, which are Google, Meta, and TikTok. And actually, we do have access to some recent data coming from Eurostat. So in Romania, number one in terms of users, it's YouTube, actually, so Google service. Then we have Instagram surpassing for the first time Facebook, and TikTok coming third with almost 9 million users. So there's a lot of social media consumption in Romania. Actually, it's higher than the per capita consumption at EU level, which says something about the profile of the country, right? And especially if you correlate that with the low media literacy levels, so on and so forth, and the lack of trust in media, mainstream media, that tells something about how persuasive, how influential social media has become. Coming back to the topic of the presentation, as I've said, my observation drawn the reports published in March and assess not only what has been reported, but also what could be documented by myself and my colleagues. Google, it's a very important platform. I cover here Google search, but also YouTube. Even though these services should be addressed separately because they have taken different initiatives, but quite modest, as you will see. So for sure, this is an infographic summarizing what I could find. Yeah, that's fine. Can you see it? Okay. So what's notable when it comes to Google's initiative, so under the Code of Practice, is the fact that it has started a partnership with the Romanian's Ministry of Digitalization in order to ensure better disinformation reporting. There was also a Romanian Google Doodle to promote voter awareness that was both for the EU elections and then also for the presidential election. Even though the visibility is debatable of this campaign, but at least it was a good initiative. Then also they had a project they called SHIELD to protect civil society from cyber attacks. However, in the reports, we don't have any metrics on that or any specifications, so I wasn't able to assess how effective this SHIELD was, in fact. When it comes to flagged cases, there were 27 disinformation cases flagged, which is quite modest compared to the scale of the phenomenon, obviously, and 460 moderation actions, because moderation is important. And indeed, when it comes to this topic, the national sensitivities and the linguistic aspects are quite important. And actually, that has always been reproached to the large platforms that they don't have consistent teams of moderators or native speakers. And actually, TikTok is under investigation, not only for this, but also part of the investigations which are ongoing, right, started by the European Commission due to the Romanian elections are related to the lack of moderation. I'll come back to TikTok later on. So in short, there is a limited transparency on the nature and impact of these actions. This is nothing new. I think this is a constant, a common element of all transparency reports. So in that sense, they declare certain measures, but it's very, very difficult to assess the effectiveness of these measures. Coming to Meta, so both Facebook and Instagram, they have also tried to do more than previously. So compared to previous reports, this is already huge progress for sure. For instance, they have declared that they have labeled 80,000 political ads, which of course they should have done because they are obliged to do so. Then they also have removed 6,300, again, unverifiable but information in the reports, removed for disinformation, more than previously. And they declare in the last report that the total ad removals exceeded, I mean, this is a very ridiculous sum, obviously, 210k euros in Romania, which is very, very little, anecdotal, right? If you compare it to the scale of ads revenues they have. Anyways, so in terms of brand safety filters, they have started using AdLooks, which is an ad verification platform. It's worldwide known, and Google uses it actually as well. So they have started using this for Romania in order to verify, but this is a for revenue actually product, because brands can use this tool that now both Meta and Google offer in order to verify whether it's safe to place their product or their brand on certain websites or in social media variously. So, and actually they pay for that. When it comes to campaigns promoting media literacy, there were some campaigns related specifically to fraud and scams, which were widespread prior to the campaign, and not only so, usually not only related to political campaigning, right, but also financial fraud, so on and so forth. As general observation, there's more volume than specificity. So there are data, metrics that they offer, aggregated information, but without specific details. So very limited local context and impact evaluation. More or less the same for TikTok, even though there are specificities, because TikTok was very influential, instrumentalized quite a lot in Romanian elections, but not only TikTok, because it was very well orchestrated, coordinated across all platforms. However, as I've mentioned, that TikTok is now under investigation, they were, let's say, more cautious, and they have declared more than they used to do. So they have declared removing 10,698 political ads, which is the highest amount in Europe, in the European Union, actually, not in Europe. Only 2 ads removed under misinformation policies, again, anecdotal. As I've said, they are under investigation, so I would have expected a larger number of ads to be removed for misinformation policies. That means that refers specifically to illegal ads, right, or illegal content, not harmful or misleading content, because that's in a gray area, and usually they don't take down, they don't remove content that has been labeled as harmful. They find it too soft, right? But for illegal content, they are obliged, they are expected to remove it quite fast, actually. They have also reported blocking fake engagement and influence networks. They said they have identified 5 influence networks in Romania. In another previous public declaration, so official declaration, they've said they have identified 25,000 fake accounts in Romania. The Romanian authorities have declared that they have found even more than that. So at least they have admitted that there was inauthentic coordinated behavior on their platform, which they haven't admitted exactly after the first round of Romanian elections. So post factum, that means in March, they have admitted to their platform hosting not only influence operations, but also a lot of inauthentic coordinated behavior. When it comes to positive news, they have supported funky citizens of our colleagues from abroad, right, with a media literacy campaign that had 47 million views, which is good compared to, I mean, the metrics of the statistics. Compared to that, for instance, influencer can get the same amount of views for, I don't know, 10 or less than that video. So it's not that much in terms of views, because views are, let's say, the most superficial metric compared to comments or shares. So we don't have other information. We don't really know whether there were any trackings in terms of attitudinal change or behavioral change. So people have been exposed to that. That's the only thing we know. So it's the tip of the iceberg. And there were 6, again, I accentuate 6 fact-checked items in Romania, which is very little compared to the content that our colleagues, for instance, are flagging constantly to the platform. And there are other civil society organizations involved in that, because for the second round of elections, the one that we had recently in May, there was a rapid response mechanism in place, so coordinated by the European Commission. All large platforms or VLOPs were obliged to take part in that. And there were some civil society representatives, including our colleagues, Funky Citizens, part of the process of reporting, flagging, almost in real time, illegal or harmful content. So in short, limited transparency and verifiability of these actions, even for TikTok. Let's say that compared to previous reports, there were efforts made by platforms, varied in scope and focus, obviously, because they have their own specificities. Google prioritized civic partnership, as I've said, with the Ministry of Digitalization. Meta enforced at a larger scale, so they have reported taking down or verifying larger volume of data. TikTok emphasized media literacy, but again, I have verified it personally with my colleagues from Funky Citizen. The partnership did exist, but they didn't have access to any metrics on that. So exposure, effectiveness, we don't have info on that. So the compliance of these three large platforms that I have analyzed lack local relevance, transparency, and also it was very troublesome to verify their veridicity, right? The implementation of them. And I think that, and I think we share this opinion that true accountability requires context-specific action, measurable outcomes, not only reported metrics. And there is always the need to better cooperate with national authorities and also to have escalation channel open with large online platforms, especially during elections. Because this is a topic quite hot in Romania. There were various discussions. I took part in some of the meetings at high level with the representatives of the Digital Services Coordinator and also representatives of the platforms, European Commission, so on and so forth. So they are always promoting the opening of these escalation channels, but apparently it's still work in progress. Hopefully we'll get there. Better sooner than later. So I don't want to close the presentation in a pessimistic mood. However, these are my observation for the time being. And obviously, sorry, I'm willing to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madalina. We are diving already deep into the implementation of the DSA in our region. Thank you so much. I will pick on, before we open the floor for discussion, on your last... Maybe I should use this microphone. I'll pick up on your last point about how important it is to have the national authorities being able to escalate. For those of you who are not that familiar with the DSA, just very briefly to explain, when it comes to the VLOPs, so-called VLOPs, very large online platforms, so basically the ones we discussed, Madalena discussed in her presentation, it's actually the European Commission who has the upper hand on monitoring the enforcement of the DSA. But the national coordinators are very, very important in this respect. So what can you comment on the Romanian situation? Because it's indeed the national coordinators and the research community that need to have the data, the research, the situational awareness so that you can escalate. Have you seen any progress with that? This question is very relevant because in Bulgaria we're still at an earlier stage of implementing the Digital Service Act, and our national coordinator is not fully empowered yet to perform their functions.
Yeah, what I can say in short is that the situation is better in Romania in the sense that there is a national DSC of the Digital Services Coordinator. They are open to discussions. We have participated in at least 3 or even more than that discussions, us and other civil society representatives. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So at least they are open to discussions. They are promising to do their best to ensure that what their responsibility will be taken care of. They have been quite proactive in terms of establishing communication channels with platforms, and I even participated in a tabletop exercise, so that was sort of a crisis situation scenario where participants of the large online platforms have participated, and also Romanian authorities. So when it comes to that, at least some progress has been made compared to previous rounds of elections. There are still problems, obviously. Number one, the independence of the institution, because indeed the presidency, I mean, they do have the budget, and the budget is cleared by the Romanian government, so there aren't any, let's say, political strings attached to that. However, the president is designed by is named by the parliamentary, which again, it's fine because he's not named or nominated by political parties, but still the way the nominations are done is not quite transparent. So that's one thing. Another thing is that they don't coordinate very well with other authorities. And we have found out, or I have found out quite recently, that when it comes to responsibilities related to elections, there are 12 institutions in Romania. So the National Digital Services Coordinator, it's only a part of a larger ecosystem. And if this authority, the National Digital Services Coordinator, doesn't have good communication channels with the other 11 authorities, they are not very effective. And that showed, I think, during the Romanian elections, the fact that they had a limited capacity to act. When it comes to the implementation of the Digital Services Act, there are still there's still a lack of clarity, because obviously they have to report to the European Commission, and the European Commission to have a certain communication with the platforms. However, where the trickiest part comes, it's it's about harmonizing actually the national legal framework with the European legal framework. And when it comes to that, the authorities are not still in sync. So there still needs to be better cooperation, more transparency, and also the national electoral law needs to be updated in order to keep the pace with what's happening on the technological side, right? Because even if there are very strict rules when it comes to, for instance, traditional media, outdoor media, right? Radio, TV stations, so on and so forth. When it comes to social media, it's very vague yet. So the legal framework needs to be improved in order to ensure that less disinformation is disseminated at such a rapid scale, right, on social media. Apart from that, as I've said, the progress has been made, and we, within Broad, both myself representing SNSPA, so the National School of Political Science and Public Administration, and my colleagues from Funky Citizens are in contact with the National Digital Services Coordinator. Hopefully we'll continue the dialogue, and we will offer our feedback, and we will also initiate, we have already initiated, but hopefully we'll make progress with organizing also an independent body of researchers, civil society representatives, sort of an advisory board that might help or collaborate better with the National Services Coordinator.
Thank you, Madalina. Thank you for providing an overview of some of the practical challenges, but also progress that has been made. If you can just stay a bit longer with us to see if there are questions from the audience. I already see a hand up. Just give us a second to transfer the phone.
My question is regarding the specifics of, along with advisory boards, in a way, sometimes we see the crisis coming and we say we have seen it coming. Is it possible to have more centralized legal implications, but also consequences through EU bodies? So if this was a tabletop exercise, what would be your recommendations for the judiciary, law enforcement, and EU bodies for rapid reaction? Thank you.
Our discussions and also the tabletop exercise that I participated in were that the National Services Coordinator needs to map the responsibility of all the national authorities involved in the process of elections, and in general, who has what type of attributes, because for the time being there is no such a mapping. So as long as we don't have access, us as researchers and also other civil society representatives involved in monitoring elections and also democratic processes in general, we don't know for sure what kind of policy recommendations we should advance with. So I think we are now in the stage where a very good mapping of responsibilities needs to be made. And then also, once we'll have the bigger picture and the clear picture, we will all understand better where the judicial part comes in and where the legal framework needs to be improved and updated. Because as I've said, it needs to be updated, number one, and then it needs to be harmonized with the European legal framework. When it comes to the Digital Services Act, the legal framework, let's say, of the Digital Services Act is very robust. So there is no need to modify that, and it won't be the case. But when it comes to the enforcement of the Digital Services Act, that's where problems are. So the national authorities need to understand very well what are their responsibilities in terms of applying the Digital Services Act. When it comes to the Digital Services Act, the main responsibilities are for the National Digital Services Coordinator. But there is also the Electoral Bureau that has some responsibilities under the Digital Services Act, and then also the National Audio Visual Council. They are also relevant when it comes to traditional media, and then they try to expand their portfolio on social media as well. So these three institutions need to get together, work together, and really try to do their best in order to enforce the Digital Services Act. An additional topic would be the AI Act, actually, who is also enforceable right now. But for the time being, Romania doesn't have a nominated authority in charge with that. So as you might know, the AI Act has come into force in the European Union, and now is the process of designating national authorities to coordinate that. For the time being, there is no such national authority design nominated in Romania. Hopefully we'll have one soon. It took some time. For instance, it took 1 year since the National Digital Services Coordinator, which is ANCOM, in Romania, has been designated. So 1 year for them to get familiarized with their mandate, what they need to do. So at least I can report some progress. Hopefully there will be progresses made in the terms of enforcing the AI Act, because we have seen in the last rounds of elections, so the elections in May, that AI starts to be part of the elections. And when I say AI, I'm referring here to deepfakes that have been used in elections. Thank you.
I would take one more question before we go to the coffee break.
Thank you very much. A very interesting discussion with the National Amount of Academic Sciences. We started with excellent keynote speech from defense side. So my question is, when we are talking about information war or warfare, tactics is important, but the strategy is much more important. So how do you see the goal and strategy of our main opponent, if not enemy, that is Russian Federation, and who is behind this strategy? We see more and more group being the main player. How we are going to oppose to this? What is the mandate of defense, and what is the role of NATO in this war? Because talking about EU only, I think we are missing the strategy. Thank you.
Okay, Todor, if you want to take that one first, and then Madalina, if you have anything to add.
Okay. Yeah, and I should say that unless until now, until recently, it looks that we don't have a winning strategy. We, not only here in Bulgaria, but also in the European Union as a whole. I would say that only recently, in the last 6 months or a year, without sanctioning even them, and it's not possible to have a winning strategy. So obviously Russian government, through the different agencies, authorities, or either Russian military or intelligence services, and so on and so on, are one of the major actors that are behind this hybrid threats and attacks. But we should not forget that they will be not happen without local enablers. So just to give you an example, the very last report that have been done by the European External Action Force Task Force, Stratcom Task Force, actually have not named even a single local actor in all the EU countries. Even this was only in the public part. So there is confidential part of this report, let's say in this way, only for internal use, that there's some information that it contains exactly this, so the identification of local actors, networks, and so on that have been spreading this information. And another, and thank you, Velizar, for pointing this out, another important step for creating a winning strategy will be to have this whole of society approach and transatlantic approach. It's not possible to build this resilience without our transatlantic partners. So NATO is very important in this way. Even if we do have some conceptual differences between the two, NATO is talking about cognitive warfare, this is European Commission is talking about FIMI. There are some conceptual differences, but still the direction is the same.
Madalina, if you can give us 2 sentences, because we are a bit over time,
Yeah,
that will be great.
I agree with also regarding the report of the European Action Service, the External Action Service. Actually, they are naming one state actor, and the same state actor that has been named by the declassified Romanian Secret Services documents, which is Russia, obviously, and they are also describing the mechanics behind it. So the micro-influencers campaign, copycat paste campaign used in Moldova and Romania as well. Also, an entire list of covert operations, troll bots, API addresses hosted by Turkey. Anyways, so there are specificities regarding that. That's public information already. And hopefully there will be better coordination to do something and to take measures against these networks of disinformation, obviously.
Thank you, Madalina.
Was the mandate of NATO, but hopefully NATO will continue to be a strong presence in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Madalina, and thank you for providing your input online. And please feel free to stay with us and listen to the rest of the discussions. We are now at time, so if you have questions, we'll probably have time, hopefully, to take them after the second panel. But now we have the coffee break, so we continue at 11:15. Thank you so much.
There was.
For the first panel, because there was an online panelist in this one, no?
I think it is. Are you sure you don't?
Има ли това стримва ли се на живо?
Present, it is.
Стримва се, да. So, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for staying with us after the coffee break. Happy to be here with all of you, and at the risk of repeating some of what was said during the first panel, as all of you know, we're all of us here today to discuss important issues against the backdrop of ever-increasing polarization, information manipulation, ultimately even an epistemological crisis. And even though our immediate material surroundings don't seem to have changed that drastically, one can't really shake the feeling that we've sort of entered a new paradigm. And here with me today to discuss some of the key issues regarding digital governance, platform accountability, countering misleading information operations through both regulation and whole of society approaches. Here with me are representatives for various parts of society. Ordinarily, I would always give the first word to the lady, but there is a plan to this. Basically, we'll start out with finding out what's happening on the front lines of information warfare, as it were, with my fellow senior analyst, Miroslav, then move to see how regulators are reacting with Simona, the chairperson of Bulgaria's Council of Electronic Media, our chief media regulator. And then, last but not least, we will turn to the private sector and its perspective on a lot of these issues. But so let's just dive right into it. Miroslav, just to start us off, tell us, how does the hybrid COE, what is the hybrid COE's approach to examining information operations and other information-related hybrid threats? What are you seeing, and then how are you converting your analysis into impact?
Well, thank you, Goran. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to share some of our findings, some of our views. Well, I would like to share how we see the informational environment threats inside one bigger picture. We call that the hybrid ecosystem of the larger ecosystem of hybrid threats analysis. Because information threats, information influence and interference is part of, speaking to as a state interference, is part of one larger picture, which we consider to be important to understand the whole picture. As one question was previously on the first panel, what is the strategy? We need to see the complete hybrid ecosystem in order to understand why is it important, the regulation that is being posing by the DSA or the tools that will follow under the Euroshield are important to protect our bigger security. So basically, we understand hybrid threats in a more contemporary view rather than it was understood previously. And at the core of every society, we have identified 7 fundamentals, on which we build the overall hybrid ecosystem. And those fundamentals are actually what makes us democratic society. And why is this important? This is important because usually we find ourselves debating whether or not hybrid threats and hybrid activities are happening everywhere, and as we are being sometimes a victim, are we sometimes maybe attacking? Well, that's not the case, because in the contemporary understanding of hybrid threats, you need to first have values which you need to protect. You need to have freedom, democracies. You need to have civil rights. You need to protect the political accountability and responsibility. You need to protect values like rule of law. This is what is under attack from hybrid threats, and that's important to be understand. And in terms of analyzing the bigger picture of the ecosystem, we have identified through a lot of analysis of hybrid activities how we have identified three, we call them spaces of every society, every democratic society, and that's the government space, which is considered with a military, diplomatic, administration. We then have the service space, which is infrastructure, all the services that the citizens are having. And we have the final civil space. Well, the civil space is the one which is constantly under attack on information domains. All the others are attacked as well, but in different approaches with different tools. To understand the hybrid threats is to get inside this ecosystem and understand that all these systems are actually connected when you are under hybrid attacks. And this is important because we are not only protecting the informational environment with the Digital Service Acts or other mechanisms, we are protecting the overall security of the society. And that is something we usually like to enforce as a meaning. And now, just to wrap up the point that I wanted to when we talk about the civil space where the information is disseminated the disinformation and where we need to take actions to protect the informational environment, we have identified one toolbox on how to, get some principles on how to create your own resilient system. And that we call that 4 lines of defense. The first line is documentation. Every society needs to have a proper system in order to identify fake news, particularly manipulative news when they are entering in their informational environment. Second is making it public, attributing and raising awareness of those threats. Third is amending the vulnerabilities on which those threats are coming. And fourth is, we call that a little bit of deterrence model. That is, create systems which immunize the society of those kind of attacks. And the Digital Service Acts, the Euroshield, are actually programs which are focusing on the last 2 models, parts of the toolbox that I have mentioned, and are part of the overall protection of the security architecture of every society. So I will just stop at the big, just as a intervention now as a beginning, and then probably we'll do another round of discussion. So thank you.
Yeah.
Before moving on, I just wanted to ask you a very quick follow-up question because I found some of what you said interesting. Speaking of the tools and infrastructure that are used to attack norms, and in the context of interconnectivity, what are some of the latest tools and infrastructure used to conduct information operations against society, and how easy is it to attribute these tools to an actor?
Well, Actually, the development of the last, let's say, 2-3 years are really getting on a fast pace. The change is getting on the change is happening on a really fast pace, and that's because we are on the brink of one new revolution. First was the internet, next was the social media. Now we are even entering into one new revolution, which is the use of AI, particularly their large language models and generative AI. So both of them are getting used, and the percentage and the penetration of the use of those are enlarging as we speak. I have entered the center 1 year ago. Back then, we were discussing the findings of the previous year, of 2023, where we have predicted, let's say, really harsh scenarios about the misuse of AI. Then, the previous year, in 2024, we have identified that our prediction, our anticipations were too, let's say, pessimistic, that the society had raised on the issue and have shown some directly automatic resilience. But now, at the beginning of 2025, we are witnessing a completely new way of perceiving artificial intelligence and large language models. First, China has built really, really solid service. Solid service that is now matching the Western Western society services. Now that's that's a game change. That changed the landscape completely. And second, we have identified those which were mentioned, Pravda models. We have found that in 2024, I have here numbers, but they're not important, like 3.5 million articles have been produced in order to trick our own Western artificial intelligence services to put in their results and their thinking, so the Russian and in some part China's narratives on the global issues. So we now have state actors teaching our artificial intelligence on what to be intelligent about. And we all are using them in order to find results, to create our narratives, and to, produce our Wikipedia pages. In order to understand how the change is influencing our society, you need to understand that we are now entering into a completely new age, and we need to rethink our positioning towards artificial intelligence.
Well, as you can tell, institutions and regulators have a very difficult challenge in front of them. And someone who's written a lot about these sort of regulations on both the EU and the national level, and is practicing it on the national level, is Simona. So, Simona, we're very interested in how Sam sees the situation, but particularly on both the EU and national level. What are the main challenges with the effective implementation of the DSA?
Thank you, Goran. Thank you, Miroslav. Indeed, the challenges are a lot, and before talking about them and really trying to tackle them down, I'd like to say a few words about the legal framework and how it functions at the moment, because many of the challenges stems from the legal framework itself. So right now, all the media regulators in the European Union work under the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. 30 years ago or 20 years ago, we were primarily focused on the so-called linear media. You turn on the television, you just monitor what's out there, and you see whether or not the freedom of expression is violated and what other values we are trying to protect by imposing sanctions on those linear media services providers. So this is the very basic, very straightforward construction. The Audiovisual Media Services Directive, which we implemented in our legislation, which the Romanian regulator is applying, and all the other media regulators are applying, is now dealing with 3 types of media or media services providers. Those are the linear, the traditional media, the so-called non-linear media services providers. This is a website or a page which includes a video which can compete with the audiovisual media content which television and radio produce. So it has to have a certain characteristics. It should be in a catalog, it should be constant, and if this page, if this website answers this criteria, it is considered non-linear media services providers. And the video sharing platforms. In Bulgaria, we have 1 registered video sharing platform, and the Council for Electronic Media is responsible for this particular video sharing platform. We monitor it, and we have some competencies also including under the DSA. YouTube, for example, they're under the regulation of the Irish colleagues of the Irish media regulator. So recently, the Digital Services Act tried to develop those and to answer those challenges, because obviously this is not enough. And what the DSA is trying to do is to create different tools and mechanisms in order to answer all of those threats which threaten different democratic values. So there are 2 main roads through which the DSA is trying to address that. The first one is the tool of moderation. We're not talking about regulation anymore, we're talking about moderation. So in the recitals 80, 81, 82 and 83, and I really encourage you to read them out back after the session, because they are very detailed. The DSA is distinguishing 4 types of systematic risks, which I liked what you said, VLOPs and VLOSs, or VLOPs or VLOSs, the very large online search engines and very large online search platforms, they have to address those 4 types of systematic risks. Each and every second, according to the Statista website, which I checked just before coming here, we have more than 4,000 posts on Facebook and more than 1,000 posts on Instagram. So this is a lot of content going out there. The platforms themselves have the obligation to address those risks and to be able to tackle them down and to narrow them down. So those risks are mainly, the first one is disseminating illegal content, and this is everything. There are some examples given, for example, child sexual abuse, selling illegal stuff, you know, the marketplaces of the platforms, you can sell many things there, so that there should be an algorithm to check what you're selling and what you can buy. The second risk, the actual and foreseeable impact of the services on the exercise of the fundamental rights. So whatever the platforms do, they cannot suppress fundamental rights, and freedom of expression is one of those rights. The negative effects on the democratic processes, civil discourse and electoral processes, as well as public security. So this is when it comes interesting, and this is what we are talking about, namely disinformation and how the big platforms can suppress disinformation, especially when those values are at risk, including the electoral processes, and we can make a reference to what's going on in Romania. And the fourth type of systematic risk is the design, functioning, or use, including through manipulation of the protection of the public health, minors, serious negative effects of the person's physical and mental well-being, or gender-based violence. So those four systematic risks are the main tool with the big platforms means to tackle down. The second road, which I started to talk about, is the figure of the digital services coordinators. In Bulgaria, the digital services coordinator is the Commission for Electronic Communication. So the idea is, on European level, those big platforms tackle the systematic risks themselves, and on national level, if we have illegal content under any type of form, the body, administrative or judicial, which distinguish this content as illegal, should address the issue before the digital services coordinator, and they have to block the access towards this content. There is a bill which is currently in the National Assembly, which is fully implementing the Digital Services Act in the Bulgarian legislation. The Digital Services Coordinator was distinguished in Bulgaria with an act of the Council of Ministers. Our Council for Electronic Media is a so-called competent body under the DSA, and our competencies are solely over the video sharing platform in Bulgaria. But talking about challenges, I will just name 3 main challenges which we foresee right now, and we are trying to prepare our staff for them. The first one is related to the so-called trusted flaggers. This is another mechanism the DSA is trying to distinguish. So the digital services coordinators will nominate trusted flaggers, and those will be independent, namely NGOs or other actors, which will be able to tell the big platforms to remove some content immediately. So they will be granted a lot of power. In Bulgaria so far, we have some requests from law firms, for example, who want to become trusted flaggers, and you can see that we should be very careful about that, because if a law firm has this power, they might use it for different purposes rather than protecting public values, because the essence of their activity is not basically on this level. Right now we have one trusted flagger, and they were granted this status by the European Commission themselves, and this is the organization SafeNet. We work with them SafeNet are the Bulgarian non-profit organization which is helping and to sustain the hotline for protection of online safety for children. And they work with many signals which they receive annually, more than 30,000. And when we have a problem on one of those platforms, we address them through their mechanism of trusted flaggers. But of course, this is not enough. We have some problems also related to preparing our human resources, technical problems, etc. This is not so important. But the most important question is about the horizontal legislation. So, for example, if one of the bodies, including one of those which are part of this whole infrastructure, decides that we have a threat of the national security and they want to they issue an administrative act in this direction. This administrative act will be under judicial review, and as you can see, the threat which was aimed through such a website or a platform narrative which is going on disseminated will be a lot of time consuming and will take a lot of time until some actions can be taken into place. And the rule of law is our primary consideration, of course, but as well, the time efficiency is crucial here, because with disinformation narratives, the time is extremely sensitive issue. And you see that in the work of the fact-checking organizations. This is also a tool which the Digital Services Act is providing. They check the facts, they give context, and we have representatives here of the Bulgarian National Television, the Bulgarian National Radio. This is another topic I will slightly mention about the role of the public service media services providers. The fact-checking work is also time-consuming, and we know that lies and disinformation narratives are spread very fast. And finally, I just want to tell you what we are doing in the terms of fighting disinformation, the Council for Electronic Media. Ever since the beginning of the war, we did very detailed monitorings over each and every one of the events related to the war and how they were actually reflected on the Bulgarian media under our supervision. Those are thousands of pages of monitoring and analysis. We also sanctioned such disinformation narratives which at the same time were violated the Radio and Television Act, also on other grounds. Because when we're talking about disinformation in law, the crucial part here is what type of disinformation can be sanctioned and in which cases. And then the answer is it can be sanctioned when and where Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights criteria are met. Namely, the restriction should be prescribed by law, it should be necessary in democratic society, and it should pursue one of the 9 legitimate aims in paragraph 2 of Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Further, we made several campaigns, including with the European Commission, regarding media literacy. So we are very active in the field of media literacy. We work with the Ministry of Culture. We are very open and in a dialogue with the Ministry of External Affairs. And also what I feel in Bulgaria is missing, and I feel many of the partners here are trying to contribute to, is a very sustainable, vocal, and active, and the Ministry of External Affairs is working in this direction, strategic communication. Because how the bodies are reacting to this information is extremely important. In which cases and when we can actually limit disinformation narratives, but also what are the narratives which the representatives of the bodies, government and institutional, are validating and also spreading is part of the entire information and ecosystem, as you said. And I think this is also crucial and it has its place in this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Simona, for that detailed answer. And also, I mean, it's obvious that content management and moderation is a big part of all of this, and I think we'll get to hear more about that from Paul. And speaking of which, what is the private sector's perspective on the DSA? How does your company see the DSA and its capacity to ensure due process and a risk-based approach in what can be a very contentious environment, frankly?
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. So I'm I'm Paul Bozav on behalf of Tremont. We are a Paris-based company. We work with major online platforms. We have a content moderation tool, so a technology that we deploy with these platforms, and we also have consultancy services. We work with most of the very large online platforms, which were mentioned today. There are around 20 of them. By the way, their number is going to increase probably in the coming months. So what I can add to this conversation is the perspective and the experience we have on their behalf. What I would be starting with is this might be very common knowledge, but what we're talking here about is in the past year is what has fundamentally changed on the internet, and it's the so-called user-generated content. So the reason why we are sitting here is user-generated content, in fact. So previously we had web pages where the owner of the web page was publishing content, but with social media and many different types of platforms, this has changed. As users, we are part of the game. We can publish now today content which is accessible to the wide public, never see in a way and at a large scale which has never been seen before in history, I would say. So we are trying to solve the problem is that me alone, I can publish something that can be illegal or harmful or against children or, of course, disinformation. That is visible straight away to everyone. And there are, of course, many stakeholders around this who have different type of interests in the game. Now, on the perspective of the large platform, what has changed with the new regulation for them is now that previously they were not responsible of what has been published by users on their platforms. I'm simplifying, of course, the situation. But with the new regulations, and I'm deliberately speaking about new regulations because there are the regulations out there, like the Terrorist Content Online Regulation, the DSA, and other countries have also regulations. Happy to talk about that in a bit. But the DSA is the biggest piece of regulation, which basically puts the responsibility on the platforms. At the moment, if the platforms becomes aware of the given content, the platform will be responsible for that content. Now, this opens, of course, the different things. Maybe the platform doesn't want to be aware of that content, of course. But this is, I'm simplifying, of course, the situation. But this is how the current setting works. What has And going a little bit into the details and answering really to the question, so there are some principles that the DSA introduces, and two interesting ones is the due process and the risk-based approach. And Simona, you have already talked about the risk-based approach. I would maybe speak more about the due process and why I'm coming from different perspective. So what does the due process mean? I'm posting something on a social media platform, and I think it's the best content that has ever been said, but the platform decides to take it down for some reason. Today I have the reason to know why that content has been taken down. The platforms must tell me this. They must tell me, for instance, how they have detected this content, whether it was detected by artificial intelligence, whether it was detected by humans. So there is a process for this. I go along the process. I say I don't agree having taken it down, so please put it back. Then the platform doesn't agree. Then we can see together an instance to kind of decide whether I'm right, whether the platforms are right. By the way, opening a parenthesis here, this is a big burden for online platforms. I've been speaking with representatives of major social media platforms. The fact that this appeal mechanism works has been really, from a work and operational point of view, put a lot of burden on the platforms. I mean, it's their problem, I would say, but I'm just saying that this opportunity exists there, and the platforms are putting resources and efforts into that. Don't want to go into the very details of the due process, but it's still changes on there. On the risk assessment part, So we work again with the same platforms on. Basically, we have been drafting their risk assessment. So the very large online platforms have more than 45 million users in the EU per month. They have to publish a risk assessment each year, which is audited. I'm underlining this. It is an audited report. So and we will see the risk assessment being published as well, or their summary, and we will see also the auditors' response to these reports. So these will be all publicly available. I think this is also a big step towards transparency, and also I think something that we can be watching. The results of the risk assessment. So it started 2 years ago. We still need to see where it will get. But I think the fact that these are transparent and out there is a big opportunity for all the stakeholders to have transparency in this space. I will stop here and go to the next question.
Thank you. I mean, unfortunately, we're already running a bit late, and also, so I'll stop here with my own questions, follow-up questions, but I do think it's okay if we do give the audience an opportunity of 5 minutes, unless, Rossi, do you have, what do you think? I think 5 minutes, so it's open to questions. Just please state your name, affiliation, and please keep it brief. I also ask our panelists to keep it brief, and say if your question is directed to a specific panelist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to celebrate Simona Veleva's warning on law firms, because as someone who has faced lawfare, question specific, besides law firms, did you also see instances of private security military companies incorporating or supporting these activities? And just a correction to our younger colleagues, perhaps instead of misleading information, we should say just corrupt information, or this in AI, corruption of corrupt information, poisoned data. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the trusted flagger status is granted by the Commission for Electronic Communications, and the example I gave you was from conversations with them. They haven't granted trusted flagger status to anyone yet. They are still trying to, they are waiting for the bill to pass, and when they have the procedure under which they can give this status, they're going to adopt procedures and safeguards in order for this status to be granted actually for eligible and trustworthy organizations. And of course, what you're addressing is a serious issue, and we've discussed it so far. I'm not aware such organizations ask such a status, but this is on the table, and of course, it should be addressed properly.
Interesting, very interesting. More questions, please?
If I can briefly just elaborate of what my two fellow speakers said about the AI Act and its mechanisms, and also about the due process which the DSA is trying to implement. The first question about the AI Act and how we are going to apply it and implement it is also partially responsibility of the Council for Electronic Media. We recently try to disseminate bodies, institutions, which will be responsible bodies under Article 733 of the AI Act. What does this mean? It means a variety of bodies, mainly the Ombudsman's body, but not only, which will be responsible to apply their mechanisms when the violation is done through AI. And what you said is extremely important, because we are feeding the information space with AI-generated content, which is trying to overlap the user-generated content, and this has very particular threats on the information ecosystem. So we are in this debate right now, and we're trying to distinguish these competent bodies. I will give you an example. The Council for Electronic Media will most probably be competent when we have deep fake videos which are disseminated through media. And this will be a good example how AI generated, and we see it's harder and harder to actually distinguish AI generated from original content. And the second question about the due process, it's really hard for VLOPs and VLOSes to distinguish and to apply this due process. And I just came back from Oxford. We were with experts from TikTok, and they gave us data that more than 90% of the illegal content, their AI mechanisms is detected in the first 3 seconds once it is uploaded automatically and not through users flagging. Of course, they miss some content, but we're talking about huge amount of data. So AI is trying to, and they're using AI vastly, but also Vlops and Vlosses and the DSA Observatory has a lot of research about that we need to have a human control as well, because AI is not enough. So I just want to say a few words about that.
Just add one thing to that. I was also, we were at the Frisco and the conference in Brussels, and actually we worked together. And basically, YouTube was there. They said 96% of the content of their content that is removed by AI. Although they still have thousands and thousands of human moderators for the rest of the content. So you can imagine the amount of content which is there.
That's very interesting. Oh, we got one more question, please.
The question on the Bulgarian Digital Services Coordinator, the CRC. I'm Deborah from the German Embassy. So what is the readiness and the capacity of the CRC? Like, how can we imagine that to look like, since they would be monitoring systemic risks, coordinating with the EU Commission, I guess, at least on the very large online platforms, and also handling, like, I as a normal user, right? I could put down my own user complaint, and then also you mentioned the trusted flagger, so that could increase lots of tasks. But how can it be done? Like, what is the capacity? What is the readiness of the CRC? Number one, and then number two, what can embassies like ours maybe do to raise awareness? Because when we speak to officials, we notice, and my ambassador is a big fan of the digital services. Actually promotes it everywhere, but we notice that it's just not talked about so much. It's not well known, at least here at all.
I'm guessing Simona will have to take part of that question, please.
Well, there were new members selected in the Commission for Electronic Communications, so I'm not the right person to talk on their behalf, and I don't do that at all. But at the best of my knowledge, we are working tightly with the Commission. We are planning a few joint events. Of course, the Council for Electronic Media is competent only for our video sharing platform, and we have tons of other competencies. I think they are preparing for their new tasks, and they should be. At the same time, you're right, the awareness of the DSA in Bulgaria is not so good, and I will give you a very particular example. Recently, an online webpage, which is quite famous in Bulgaria, were disseminating defamatory statements and defamatory speech regarding a Bulgarian judge. And those defamatory statements were distinguished like that by the Bulgarian court. The Bulgarian Court of Cassation issued a decision obliging this webpage to actually take down this content. But they did that motivating their act not through the DSA, which would be the right and proper instrument for that, rather than through the European Convention of Human Rights. So even the Bulgarian court is not fully using the tools of the DSA, although they're aiming the same result the DSA was established for. We are there to help with anything we can. With our colleagues, we are jointly working on many issues related to radio frequencies, etc. I think they're preparing, and they were the ones which actually were leading the process of drafting the bill, so they are very well aware of their competencies, and I hope the Bulgarian state will support them in this effort.
Yes, I did want to give Miroslav an opportunity to wrap some of this, and with that, we will be finishing. Thank you, Miroslav.
Well, I mean, there are obviously a lot of work that the regulator bodies needs to work on, and they're doing a good job, I'm sure of that. But there is some two principles which were the basis of when the Service Act was created, the Digital Service Act, and also the overall SHIELD program. And that is how much trust you can build inside of the society. It's good that we had representative of Finland, Mr. Janne Kuusi, I believe, was, and because, I mean, we work in Finland, hybrid COE, and a lot of what we are doing is actually being imposed by the Finnish success. And not only in digital literacy, but also in overall protection of the, let's say, we call that cognitive sovereignty now, the way that they have protected their own right to sovereignly think and make decisions. That is because they have achieved building trust, and we are constantly mentioning some values which the society needs to be to achieve. That's creating the whole of the government approach, which means it's not only a regulative body, it's not only one Stratcom unit, but it's the whole of the government approach, communications between all those institutions, exchange of knowledge, opinion, which has been perfected, let's say, in Finland. And it is something that we need to learn from. And that's only the one part. The second part, which is also very important, is the whole of society approach. And when they say that everybody needs to take care of their own security as a country, they mean it literally, because they have included the civil society inside the processes of protecting their informational environment very thoroughly. So I know that that's a problem here in this area, and not only in Bulgaria, Romania, like from the Black Sea region, but also from the region which I follow more closely, that's the Western Balkan and the Adriatic region. And so we have problem with media literacy, we have problem with achieving trust, we have problem with achieving cooperation between the civil society and the government institutions which are entitled to protect the environment. And as we have heard with the last example, sometimes the institutions are even not coordinated enough and jumping one from another instead of working together. So in order to match your success, try to match the trust that you have succeeded in building in the society. Thank you.
I think that's a great note to end on. And please, a round of applause for our panelists. And with that, we're done. Thank you. Thank you guys for bearing with me. Thank you.